Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're excited to have with us Marya Ryan. Welcome to the show, Marya.
Maybe.
Let me raise myself up on my stool. So,
I'm also a little low, but I'll just have to stand up straight.
okay. So, Marya spent 13 years inside personal injury law firms, preparing cases, and kept seeing the same thing. When liability was unclear, attorneys didn't have the crash science they needed fast enough or affordably. So she built Bolo Consulting, a crash reconstruction firm staffed with former cops, a former NHTSA engineer, and an ACTAR certified reconstructionist who can read a car's black box like a flight recorder, which I didn't even know exists. So after 13 years, and I guess most people don't, we're going to get into that. After 13 years preparing personal injury law cases, what was the moment you realized you needed to stop working for law firms and start building something that they were all missing?
So it was a need that I constantly saw with the multiple attorneys that I worked with. I worked for a pretty big firm that had at least 10 attorneys, a very big amount of cases, over 2,000, 3,000 cases per year. And a lot of those cases, once they were handed to me, we were missing a ton of information. Nonetheless, when it got to litigation, it was definitely gone. So the evidence that we could have used to disprove the claim of the defendant insurance or to help the liability or the causation of the client's injuries, it was gone. So I then partnered with my husband, which is a detective for one of the local police departments, and we opened Bolo.
Oh, okay. So your husband and wife team.
Yes, husband and wife,
Right.
family business.
So you started originally as a paralegal in personal injury. What was it that you were working with day to day that kind of trained you to know what, or what was the big thing that kind of jumped out at you that you saw, that's you thought, oh, this is so frustrating, or your attorneys got frustrated? Was there like a moment, or was it just a culmination? Can you talk a little bit about the history behind that?
Yeah, so a lot of the cases that we have just seems like they were missing information and learning more about what the vehicles contained. There's no better witness than the technology that we have nowadays. So going back, because a lot of people don't know about this, but ever since 2014, it's been mandated for all vehicles that are produced to have an EDR, which is an event data recorder. And that can give us pre crash speed, pre crash braking, any swerving, anything that the driver was doing at the time. So once the vehicle thinks that it's about to get into an accident, it begins to record. So typically we would get 4 seconds prior to the actual collision, the actual impact. And so for a lot of the cases that we were getting, which were either disputed liability, either left-hand turn cases, I swore I had the green light. All of these cases, we were just missing one piece of information. And typically, and unfortunately, in car accidents, witnesses disappear. They're there in 1 second, they're gone the next. You try reaching them, and you just can't get a hold of them, especially if it's something that goes to litigation, because a lot of people don't want to be involved in court.
Hmm.
And so with the EDR, that gives us all of the defendable information that we can produce to either the defense, or the defense can produce it to plaintiff to be able to prove your case. And so with a lot of cases that have to do with egregious speed, we can tell that in the EDR, and that can strengthen the claim, even if it's not a liability issue, even if it's a case that it's a clear rear end, we can pull the data, and that can give us, like I said, 4 seconds back, and it can say that that defendant was going 60 miles per hour, where it was a 40 miles per hour. And that can increase the value of the claim just by what is that, egregious speed or just bad driving behavior where the accident could have been avoided.
So do are most attorneys aware of this black box? Do most of them know about it, or?
So a lot more attorneys are aware of it. I think that the defense uses it more often because it is costly. So you're paying an engineer to go out from anywhere from $300 to $600 per hour, go out to the scene, do the inspection of the vehicle. So it does get costly. And so the attorneys do need to pick and choose when they use it. And so that's where I kind of found the gap to be able to get these cases and get EDR technicians out to be able to absorb the data, get the data, and present it to the attorney, and we do that flat based. So we charge $600 as a flat fee in the Tri-County South Florida area, and then that way we can give that to an engineer, and then the engineer has the information. And so I think that was the biggest gap with the attorneys. The attorneys didn't want to always use it because it is costly, and those costs come out of the client's pocket. And so it's hard to explain to the client when you're getting a bill for $2,000-$3,000 as to why it was needed. And it's always a risk. If it's a liability situation that we can't prove, or the attorney couldn't prove, then unfortunately those costs are coming out of the client's pocket, and they're not going to be happy.
So, what percentage of your business is just going into those black boxes, those EDRs, versus the other part where you have where you're reconstructing the accident?
I would say it's a good 60-40. So we have a lot of the quick EDRs, they preserve it. They don't know if they're going to need it for litigation. Because you got to remember, these vehicles are not being held. They're usually at a Copart, at a tow yard, just being held as a preservation. Once the attorneys release it, they're gone. They're sold. If they're not preserved, they're gone anyways, and there goes the information. So a lot of our business is getting the EDRs and preserving it for litigation. We do have the percentage where the engineers get involved. They have to go out, do measurements of the scene, review the EDR data, and be able to help reconstruct the entire accident.
How many of these do you do a month, or how many clients do you have? Well, I don't want you to ask you too much inside information to disclose, but how many clients do you have currently that are using using your services? About.
Yeah, so we have about 15 to 20 attorneys that are religious with any accident that has good policy and good damages. They automatically do it. They don't even think twice. They get the accident, they get the police report, and they call us just with any accident. Some are still just waiting to see if there's a liability dispute or if they need questioning with like the injury causation, because that's another thing. With injuries, we can also see the delta V's that occurred in the incident. And that's something more for an engineer to speak on because it comes into like biomechanical situation, but you can tell the forces that the body incurred during the incident. And so when the defense is coming out and saying there's no way that the plaintiff is injured in that capacity, then you can argue with the delta V's and with the impact that that person felt. Yes, it is possible that that person did suffer those herniations or that fracture, whatever it may be. So there's a lot you can do with the EDRs, not only the liability, but like I said, with dispute of injuries, it's very important.
So do you help the attorneys to interpret what that means? Because I mean, so by this point, you probably looked at hundreds or thousands of these EDRs. It
Yeah.
seems to me like you kind of establish some expertise there.
Yeah, so I have the engineers or one of the traffic homicide detectives sit down with the attorneys and go through what the findings are, and that's included in our flat fee base. And that was important to me when we built this company, is to be able to make it accessible and affordable. I didn't want the attorney to get this information and unfortunately not know what to do with it. And so once the attorney calls us, we go out to the scene. We help with the scheduling with opposing counsel. We get all the pictures, we get the EDR, and then we set up an appointment with the attorney, the paralegal, whoever is taking the case, and we go over every single thing that comes out of that, whether it's good or bad. that's unfortunately just the name of the game, because sometimes it comes out that your client was speeding or they were doing something that was not said, but that's also important for the attorneys to know, because unfortunately it's going to come out in litigation.
Mhm.
So at that point, we're not putting anything in writing. We're just reviewing what is said, so they're aware that that's what the information contained.
So I read on here too, you use 3D laser scanning and aerial drone photography at crash scenes. Is that something additional that you do?
Yeah, so that's really important when you're going to reconstruct the scene. With that, you can do the LiDAR scannings and basically do a model of the vehicle. And that is needed for animation. So I'm sure you've seen the animation that we can do now in general. That just comes to when you're doing mediation or you're going into litigation in front of a jury, you can put the information of the EDR and the laser scans, and you can format in order to show the jury exactly what happened. And it looks very realistic. It almost looks like a movie. It's getting really good, the technology that's out there.
So, what's the most common mistake attorneys make when it comes to preserving crash evidence?
Not sending the preservation letter quick enough. I've seen a lot of times when the defense or the insurance knows that it's a bad accident and there's likely information there in the vehicle that they want to not necessarily hide, but wouldn't be great to have. They are very quick of just making sure that the vehicle is sold and gone. And typically at that point, there's no way of getting it back. We've gotten lucky where we have found vehicles. We have investigators that we work with that go to the lengths of finding it abroad. So a lot of these scrap vehicles are sold for rebuilds in Honduras and Mexico and all of these different places. And there's one circumstance that we had a car in Mexico. They were kind enough to send us a black box, which the black box is a tiny little thing that you can ship. They were able to retrieve it and send it to us. We got the information. But of course, that gets costly. And it's just unnecessary to have to go through those links when if you send the preservation letter quickly and get us to the tow yard as soon as possible, then we don't need to do all that.
So, so really, do these insurance companies, when they see something come on their radar screen, are they actively trying to sell the car immediately or ship it out of the country to, obfuscate?
Yeah, I can't say that they are with confirmation, but I'm sure because they know what the EDR contains. And that information is incredibly powerful when your insured did something wrong. So if your insured is going 110 miles an hour, you don't want that in writing that that person did that. And so that information in front of a jury or to an attorney is incredibly powerful. And so not saying that they are trying to get actively trying to get rid of it, but I'm sure that they try to avoid getting that in the hands of a plaintiff attorney.
So how complicated is it when you have one of these high-tech cars like a Tesla involved in a crash? Because it's more than just the black box. There's more there's a lot more data in a Tesla than there is in a typical vehicle.
Yeah, so Teslas are actually very user friendly. The video or any of the video surveillance that comes in is in a USB drive. So that's fairly easy. What has gotten complicated is the Cybertrucks, and the Cybertrucks, a Tesla technician has to go out directly because they have to disassemble the front of the dashboard. And so a lot of times we don't get involved with Cybertrucks only because it's a higher liability of the owner of the vehicle if it's not a totaled vehicle for them to turn around and say something was not done correctly. So those we refer out to someone that can do those. But as far as the other Ys, the other models, those are fairly easy. They connect just like the other vehicles.
Oh, so they're actually easier than the other
They
vehicles.
are easier. And actually the new technology that's coming out with Tesla is amazing because on the dashboard it comes out with the speed of the vehicle. So you'll see the interface of the vehicle traveling and all the other cameras that are surrounding. And then in the interface it'll give you the miles per hour that it's going. So it's actually pretty great the way that they've engineered things.
So walk me through what happens when an attorney calls Bolo. We didn't even say the name of your firm. We should have, which is Bolo. After a serious crash, what does the first 24 hours look like?
The first 24 hours, it varies. But usually I will sit down or somebody from our staff will sit down and go over exactly what they need. And it goes back to what we discussed, whether it's a liability issue, whether it's a causation, whether it's an amazing case, and they just want to preserve as much as they need. So we want to make sure that we hold the hand of the attorney because it's also not their expertise, and this is why they're hiring experts. So we make sure we sit down and know what's important to the attorney and what it is that they need to have. So once that is done, once we speak with the attorneys, we schedule with the defense. So typically, if it's a big defense firm, they'll also have their experts come out. They'll have their attorneys. So it does take a little bit to get these scheduled and a little bit of a back and forth, but we handle that for the client. So in essence, the attorneys just need to send us the police report, the property damage photos, exactly what they need. We'll have that conversation with them, and then the information of who we're speaking with to be able to get that scheduled. Once that is scheduled, we'll go to the scene. We'll do a ton of photos of the outside of the vehicle, inside of the vehicle, get the EDR, see if there's anything that is interested in the vehicle. There's a few cases, like product liability cases, that we were able to just highlight for the attorney to just take a look at it. We did take pictures of like the airbags, if the airbags didn't come out correctly, or if the seat is dislodged and it was a minimal property damage incident. So little situations that you're just looking at the accident as a whole of like what happened, but all of our experts and our technicians are trained to be able to just look at every component of the incident to make sure that there isn't anything else that they can look at. Like airbags is a big product liability situation when, and I'm sure you've heard this, when an accident happens and the airbags didn't go off. That's a big deal. That's a big deal to the injuries of the client and what their body sustained. So we're always making sure that we're looking for that. And our technicians are always making sure that they're just not looking for the EDR. They're looking at the car, how the car sustains the impact, all of that. And then we go ahead and discuss that with the attorney.
So let's say an attorney has never used your services before. Um, are most of them aware of the EDR in the car?
I think most of them are aware. I don't think that they know the capabilities of what the EDR can give us. And it's ever evolving because technology is just moving so quickly, like the Teslas always have new information that they can provide us. And so that's our job too, is to be able to keep up with the technology and to educate our attorneys of what our services can provide to them and what information the EDRs or something else can provide to them.
And then as far as providing value, so let's say you sit down with an attorney for the first time. How do you help? How do you actually, how are you helping them so that they can use your services in the most productive way possible? What's what's that conversation look like?
So it's always education. And I've noticed that's been the best way to help the attorneys know when to use us, is educating them on exactly what the EDR can give us and how it can help their case. So explaining to them, going back to the causation issue, even though they don't have a liability issue, it's the potential that they can use the delta V's of the vehicle to prove that the herniations were caused by these accidents, or that the defendant was driving at egregious speeds. So just having that conversation with the attorney at all the accessibility that we have with this information is, and like you said, not all attorneys are aware. I think 90% of the attorneys are aware that there is an EDR, but they're not aware of the capabilities. So closing that gap of educating them of what an accident reconstructionist can do is amazing.
How do you close that gap? What's the way that when you do your outreach to a bunch of attorneys, how do you do that? What's the most effective way that you found to do that? It was with, you're picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, we have this and this is how," or do you use some other kinds of marketing or
Yeah, so we've been pretty lucky that we don't do marketing as in the sense of outreach. We have gotten very fortunate to have a lot of client referrals. And so they typically already come into the conversation knowing what they're looking for. We have done a lunch and learn with attorneys, and we break down exactly what an EDR is, what the police report can be wrong or not. We also do scene canvassing, which basically we go out to the scene and we make sure if there is video cameras, and if there are, then we retrieve that information. And with that, we can do a speed analysis, which if it caught the incident, we can predict the speed of the vehicles. And so it's not just EDRs, it's not just what the engineers do. It's just an overall preservation of evidence is very important because there's so much that we can do either from a video of the crash, the accident scene. Witnesses are very important. So when a client comes to us, we educate them on every single thing that we can provide. That way, when they have that one case, they know, oh, I remember that they could potentially do that, and then they give us a call.
so do you have other competition in your area that also offers similar services?
Yeah, there is competition. There's bigger firms that have, of course, a lot of engineers. They have everything: engineers, technicians. There's plenty of competition for sure.
So what do you think your main advantage is over your competitors?
Main advantage is price point and our flexibility to be able to get somebody out as soon as possible. Um, and I think we have pretty good relationships with our attorneys, which is why they continue sending us business. There's a lot of times that they just have a question and they pick up the phone and say, "Hey, does this make sense?" We're not going to sit down and do billable hours for that. It just we know that they're going to come back when it's something that they need. And so having that client relationship, I think it's very important in any business, is being able to know that you're the trusted person that is going to answer their phone call and have that friendship with them.
So the other firms that are out there competing against you, are some of these national, and are you looking at staying there in South Florida, or are you looking at expanding potentially?
So we have, yes, so the other bigger firms are national, and they do a whole lot. They do fire explosions, they do everything in the genre of expert work. We have accident reconstructionists in Texas. The two experts that we have from NHTSA are in Washington. And so we are able to pick up work in other states. Um, Probably finish growing in Florida, and then our idea is probably to move to Texas next because we have quite a few clients there. So that would be our next move is Texas.
Okay, so what if you have something going on in Texas, for example, then so you said you have some clients there already.
Yeah.
So how do you service those clients that are out of town?
Same way, same. So we have an accident reconstructionist there. And so whenever a lot of the attorneys now are dually barred. So if they're barred in Florida, they're also barred in Texas, they're barred in New York, they're barred in other states. And so we try to accommodate that as best as possible. If we don't have someone in that specific state, I probably know someone in those other states that can help them. And we're happy always to do the referral to help another expert out. But the process is the same. So, like I mentioned, other experts are in other states. And so that really doesn't hinder our work. We have the Texas and everybody that can do the inspections there. So it doesn't really necessarily hinder our capabilities in at least in Texas.
So I'm going to take the cynic side of this. So some attorneys might say, well, they're the economy place. How I don't see how they can do that for those kinds of pricing. How do you compete? how do you position yourself to have the advantages, but still be able to be comprehensive, or at least comprehensive in what it is that you do, and have and keep that kind of price point?
I think the reality is that there's the bigger firms are of course going to be much more expensive and our price point could be different. But that was important for me when I started this is to be able to provide these to the attorneys at our price point. And so not always is an engineer going out to the scene because of course his hourly rate is very much different than our technicians. Our technicians are incredibly well trained. They have all the certifications to be able to do all the downloads, the inspections, take a look at the vehicles. Carl, for example, he's one of our main technicians. He is a mechanic, teaches mechanics out in Broward, one of the Broward colleges here. And so he's an expert when it comes to these vehicles, breaking down the vehicles, getting to the vehicles. And so he's not an engineer, but he is trained enough to be able to look at these vehicles, look at the damage, and know what's going on. In certain cases, attorneys want to only have an engineer at the scene and be able to do that inspection. And of course, that'll change the price point. But if they're okay with having a technician go out and do that, then that's where we're able to keep that price point low for them.
So why would it make a difference whether you have an engineer or a technician go out?
I don't
Since
see
you're really harvesting the data, really, isn't that what you're taking photographs and harvesting data?
right.
Is that actually what happens?
Yeah, so I think it's important that someone that's knowledgeable enough review the data. The data can be read differently. So I think that's where it comes the most important to have someone that's knowledgeable. And so after Carl or one of the technicians is complete with their assignment of getting the information, getting everything that they need, that's when it goes in the hands of one of the engineers or one of the experts. And that can range from a THI deputy from one of the local police departments to an engineer, depending on the severity of the case and depending on the attorney's price point. So it's typically always in the hands of one of our experts, unless the attorney has told us there's nothing that we need to do at that point. Just wait if we go into litigation. So
Okay.
we try to be cognizant that not every single case deserves an engineer right at the scene to spend $4,000 or $5,000 before they even know what they have, before even knowing if they really need this information.
Mhm.
So the importance to me was having someone at the price point that we can get someone out. And even with $600, even though it is $600, it's not going to make or break the bank when you're closing out the case.
So you say your reports are courtroom ready. What makes a crash reconstruct recon, blah, 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 reconstruction report hold up under cross-examination versus one that falls apart?
I think one that falls apart is one that doesn't have experience. Some of our experts are traffic homicide deputies, like I mentioned, and they have hands-on experience both in the courtroom and also out in the field. They're handling accidents day in and day out. And so I think that holds up in court when you're going against opposing counsel or the defense is going against plaintiff, is that our experts have that experience to be able to testify the accuracy of these reports.
So the having an expert appear in court, that's a separate charge, obviously, with it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how often do you have that where you have somebody who appears in court?
It's getting more often. I think a lot of more cases are going into litigation. A lot of the cases, really, I would say like 80% of the cases as of now have been to preserve evidence. And I would say
Hmm.
the rest goes into litigation. But again, these cases can take 2 to 3 years to even appear in court. And
Right.
so there may be a case that we worked in 2 years ago that may just be getting to the point of depositions in the next couple of weeks. So it does take a little bit to be able to get to that point.
So you work with both plaintiffs and defendants,
Hmm.
the insurance companies and attorneys. How does uh, how do you maintain credibility when you're working with both sides?
So really accident reconstruction and going back to what the EDR is giving us, if the defense pulls up the EDR, the defense attorney, the defense expert pulls up the EDR, or the plaintiff expert, you're going to get the same thing. So you're going
Hmm.
to get the same information, the same speed, the same braking, the same everything. And so it really shouldn't matter who you're going for. All these experts are doing is making their calculations to prove what the EDR says. So whether it's a speed claim, whether it's a left-hand turn case, it really is the calculation. So it does not matter whether it's plaintiff or defense.
Okay, that wasn't a gotcha. I just wanted to get that out of you.
We've gotten that before.
So, if someone's has is an attorney and they're looking for a solution to, how do we, or they may not even know about the black box, or they maybe they know about it, but it's just too much money and too much hassle to get that out. How would they go about contacting you?
So they can contact us for a free consultation. We will always look at a police report and see exactly what they need first, before we even tell them to do before we even charge anything. Only because we want to. Our interest, of course, is with our client, and so they can call us. They can do a consultation. If they don't want to speak with me, they can speak with one of the experts, and they can go over their needs, and then that way we can see if we can help them or not.
And where do they find you? Online, on the phone?
Yeah, bololegal.com. And then they can email ops, at bololegal.com. Or they can call my cell phone, which is 561-901-9968.
So you never escape.
Never escape. Unfortunately, I don't take a vacation because my phone's always ringing.
Okay. Just one other question. As far as if someone's maybe out of the South Florida area, what other areas could you offer your services in?
As big as Texas is, we can take care of Texas. We have one that's on the two different regions of Texas, so we can pretty much handle all of Texas, Washington, Maryland, Virginia. And then, of course, if they need a referral, then they can always call because accident reconstruction is fairly a small group of people. And I can always see if I can help connecting them with someone that can in those regions that we don't have somebody.
So when you say Washington, you're talking about DC?
Washington, D.C. Yeah, Washington,
Yeah.
Maryland, Virginia.
Okay. Okay, great. Well,
Thank you,
Mariah, thanks
Zane.
so much for coming on. Hang with me for just
Thanks.
a
Those are
second.
actually really great questions. I'm impressed.
Thanks. I'm glad that this was helpful. You're a good guest. It's a kind of an interesting topic. So thanks a lot. I
Yeah, very
appreciate it.
niche. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.